Hello, Alabama fans, and welcome to the BOL Tim Watson Andrew Bone Show. This is our inaugural one this year. First one we've ever actually did, talk about a little everything. I am BamaOnLine.com publisher Tim Watson. With me is Andrew Bone. He's the recruiting editor, but he does a lot of team stuff. He contributes to everything, trigger skills, grilling, all that kind of stuff. He's not much on movies or basketball. But, Andrew, it's good to have you in here. We got a lot to talk about. We got Alabama football. We've got, which we're definitely going to talk about. We're going to have some predictions and breakthrough players and stuff like that. We've got anticipated some of the best games of the year on week one, which is awesome to have something to talk about. And, of course, we're going to talk about recruiting. Alabama's got one of the top 10 classes in the nation. They got 4 or 5 stars. They're in action. They had a really big weekend this past weekend for the first time where most of the guys played. We'll touch on that, how these guys are doing. And then at the end of the show, we'll talk about recruiting and where Alabama stands and what else that we might expect the rest of the year. But Andrew Bone, how excited are you for this weekend? It's finally here. We've talked about it amongst ourselves for a very, very long time.
Yeah, I mean, last weekend didn't really feel real. I mean, it wasn't week one, I guess. It was week 0, and it kind of breaks you in. It was still kind of felt like the preseason. It's like the preseason week, before the real stuff kind of gets going. I don't think I watched 1 second of football last weekend, which is probably embarrassing for everybody that's been waiting for college football season. My son just had different plans last weekend, as I'm sure I told you all about. But yeah, I mean, this is the week where you finally get to buckle in and sit down and wake up this morning in Birmingham and it's 58 degrees outside, which is pretty crazy. I was like, man, is it already mid-October or early November? But we know that heat's going to come back here pretty soon. So I'm excited, ready to get going, see what Alabama has in store for them this year.
I agree with you on the weather. I was outside at like 3 o'clock. We were talking. I lit a cigar and I was like, why am I not like smoldering, ready to go inside? Felt like I was covered in a blanket. It was very cool. We got football weather here and we've got football. You're right about week one. The Kansas game was fun. But if you had to get anything done before this weekend, that was the time to do it. I mean, Kansas was a fun game, had a little bit other going on. But this week you got so many big games. Ohio State and Texas. Literally a possible national championship game last year being played with so many storylines, including Arch Manning and Julian Saint. And going to the SEC, I think that's a story. When I was looking it up, there's so many teams that have a first-year quarterback. I mean, Tennessee unexpectedly has a first-year quarterback, with Nico gone. So you have so much stuff happening. But let's talk about Florida State and Alabama. I think Alabama's a 14-point favorite going to Tallahassee. The Florida State quarterback transfer has not been shy. They've got Gus Malzahn. You've got Alabama. LT Overton hasn't been shy. Andrew, give me a couple thoughts on this game.
You frozen?
No, I'm good.
Oh,
I'm waiting on you to talk.
You froze up there for a second, Timmy. Yeah, I mean, I think this weekend's obviously throughout the country, not just in Tuscaloosa. Everybody's kind of waiting to see how the quarterback's going to perform for their first official start. So what's Ty going to be able to do with this offense? How's Ryan Grubb going to make this offense look a lot different than what we saw last season? And obviously, the quarterback position in the way that Ty Simpson is compared to Jalen, it's obviously going to be a lot different. So you're really excited to see that. But as far as going down to Tallahassee, reading different reports from Florida State guys, reading the different message board. Now, fans are different. Fans are they're always going to predict their team and always going to say the other team doesn't have good players and they're not as good as they were last year at these positions. But reading different coaches, reading different lineups, depth charts and stuff like that. I mean, Florida State's weird because you look at the top 11 on offense or the 11 guys on offense, and I think every single one of those players was a transfer in. Now, not this past year, but over the course of the last couple of years, every single one of those guys were transferred in. You see some guys on the defensive side of the ball too that, you sort of know, but not really. I mean, you know Earl Little Jr. There's a couple other guys, but from top to bottom, I feel like we haven't heard a lot of those names in the past. That's not to say that they're not good. They just didn't really cross over with Alabama, as we see with a lot of schools like LSU and Texas A&M, Auburn, schools like that throughout the season, Georgia, but With Gus Malzahn, I talked to two former Alabama defensive players this week. Guys that played on two different eras of national championships. I think that their biggest concern heading into the game, not necessarily the team, Alabama's team. It was Gus Malzahn. What's Gus Malzahn going to be able to do? With the Florida State offense, he doesn't have head coaching responsibilities anymore. It's all just focused on the offense. He's going to have some tricks up his sleeve. He's got a quarterback to kind of run that offense, but do they have additional playmakers? Do they have a sturdy offensive line that can hold up and block against Alabama's defensive front? So I'm really excited to kind of see that battle between Kane Womack and also Gus Malzahn throughout the day.
I will say, based on past history, Gus has only focused on offense his whole career. I mean, I don't think he was ever, at Auburn, the talk was like Kevin Steele was his defensive coordinator. So Kevin would run his half, Gus wants his half. And you know how offensive coordinators that like to score are, just give me the ball. Let the other team score fast or get a turnover. I want the ball in my hands. But a couple of names we followed in the recruiting process or we're familiar with, Deuce Robinson, transferred from USC, was a big-time guy Alabama's linked to. And Squirrel White's a very familiar name, right up the road in Birmingham. Transferred from Tennessee, had a pretty good career. I think losing him is a little bit of a blow to Tennessee when you look at they've only got 7 scholarships, wide receivers the last time we checked, including the Alabama transfer Jefferson. But you're right. I mean, you look at this offense, we're familiar with some names. I'll tell you, I've heard more about Gus Malzahn, and I respect him as an offensive mind. And it feels like nobody's really factoring in at the same level that Ryan Grubb is at Alabama. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. I mean, that's a guy that will match wits with anybody else. But I think you have to give a little bit more grub, and that's what I think I'm most excited to see. Like you said, the offense. Ty Simpson. I mean, it stinks Jam Miller is out of the game. Really looking forward to him after the reviews. But
let me say this about Jam Miller, though. I talked to a former player, Saban era guy who's been down to a few of the practices, and he's watched these guys. Not just the short media viewing period or going out to the scrimmage. He was able to watch practice a couple different times, see these guys in person. And he said, that running back group is about as good as I have seen from a physical standpoint in the last few years. He goes, I think they're really talented. I think they're deep. They don't have a lot of experience, but they're going to be a lot better of a unit than most people think. Even with Jam Miller out, guys thought that Richard Young and Daniel Hill were two guys that he was really impressed with out on the field. Obviously, you got to see it happen, in a game situation. But hearing that from somebody that played with a lot of elite running backs during his time in Tuscaloosa, it has to give you some confidence as far as the backfield heading into the season without Jam Miller.
Yeah, and Grubb, he'll run the ball, but I know his pass first guy. I mean, that's what we saw when he was at Washington with those wide receivers. And I got to think he's licking his chops when he sees his wide receiving core when he walked in here. Now, he had a good one at Washington. 3 NFL players. Jeremy Bernard was the 4th wide receiver. And you remember when Jeremy transferred, they're like, this guy's great. This guy's an unbelievable wide receiver. He was trapped behind 3 top 100.
And they thought he was going to be wide receiver 1.
He would have the next year when those 3 guys left. And then he came here and would have been wide receiver 1, except, of course, for Ryan Williams as, give him his money's run. Andrew, before we get our predictions, I've got one ad I've got to read. Man, college football season's finally back, and there's nothing like it. The tailgates, the sound of the band, walking into Bryant-Denny Stadium and seeing that sea of crimson, being in the stands with your friends and your family is the best feeling in the world, which I think we both agree with. Getting tickets, that's a harder thing to come by. That's usually the frustrating part. You're stuck in lines or clicking through login screens, watching prices jump at checkout. All you want is to be there with your people. That's where Game Time changes everything. This is obviously a Game Time ad. It's an app that gives fans the advantage. It's the fastest and easiest ways to grab tickets. The part I like the best, I think, is a couple of taps and you're in. The seats are guaranteed, but the fees are up front, which I know you and I bought a lot of tickets. That is kind of irritating to say $110 and check out $185. That is a tough one. But Game Time, I just pulled up the other day. College football tickets are starting at $25. I did look those up, and I love the feature. So if you're trying to get to Bryant-Denny or any college football game this fall, I know Bama's on the road, take the guesswork out of it with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code ON3 on 3 for 20% off, $20 your first purchase. Terms apply. That code is ON3, which is on 3 for $20 off. Andrew, let's do picks to click here. Who is your offense? And it doesn't have to be, Ryan Williams or whatever. It could maybe be a little bit of a sleeper, or it could be a guy you just think is going to be overwhelming the top player on that offense.
I mean, I think it's going to be Ryan. I really do. I mean, I think
that's Ryan if you didn't.
That's everyone's probably prediction for the most part. I think anybody that follows Alabama just once every 6 or 7 weeks, they're probably going to say Ryan Williams because it's the most familiar name. But Alabama has a stacked wide receiver room this year that we've talked about throughout the last ever since the spring, ever since Isaiah Horton arrived on campus and really kind of dominated, and you started seeing all the talk about Rico Scott kind of coming into his own, and how deep they are with Jeremy Bernard coming back and these other guys that are starting to rise. But I think Ryan's going to still be such a big instrumental part of the offense, similar to Devontae Smith. I think they're going to use him in a variety of different ways. We heard it already that he goes in motion a lot. They line him up in different positions. They want to get him the ball. They want him to be the playmaker that they know that he is. Obviously, they're going to spread the ball around, but I think we're still going to see, in my opinion, a Devontae Smith, used like Devontae Smith, maybe like his junior season at Alabama. I just think he's going to be one of those guys that, you're going to want to get the ball to. He's going to score touchdowns. And, I think Ty Simpson's going to be the guy that's going to be able to get him the ball and Ryan Grubb in a variety of ways.
I'm going to go with Daniel Hill for a couple of reasons. One, I think Daniel's going to be the guy they go to try to get the tough yards, the 3rd and 1. Something they struggled a little bit with in the past. I think he's that guy. And two, I think he's going to be that chance, we hope, to be that 6th offensive lineman like Najee Harris was, protecting his quarterback when he drops back. I mean, he's 240-plus pounds. He's a physical guy, and we don't talk enough about his hands out of the backfield, kind of forgotten thing. So I think Daniel could be huge. I also think Richard could bust one, Richard Young with his speed, but Daniel's got a chance to impact this. And we've seen them throw the ball out of the backfield. We've seen them look for ways to get guys out in the open space, and he is a load. Let's go to the defense. Who's a guy, time to shine? Who's your guy?
I've said it several times on the board. I've said it on this show, and I'm going to stick with it, and that's going to be LT Overton. I think he's the difference maker for Alabama.
You're going straight chalk. You're going straight the best players ever. I respect it because I was taking them if you did.
Well, I mean, you look back at LT last year, and he had some flashes last year, but what was the most frustrating part for LT Overton last year? It was getting the quarterback down on the ground. He'd have him in his grasp and then just break free. I mean, that happened so many times. I mean, he could have had. It seemed like he could have had 15-plus sacks last season, but just couldn't get the quarterback down on the ground. I think that changes this year. We've heard about it throughout the spring, throughout the summer. He is just constantly in the backfield, and that's what they need. That's what they lacked last season. We talked about that, going into the fall camp. One of the 3-4 biggest questions: were they going to be able to get pass rush this season? And interested to kind of see who else emerges from that group. I mean, Quay Russo lost 20-something pounds, but is he going to be able to? Is he going to be more of that physical guy on the edge, or will we see him actually make a lot of plays in the backfield this year? So I think LT Overton is my guy for the defensive MVP this season, whatever you want to call it. I think he has 10-plus sacks. I think he gets the quarterbacks on the ground. I think he makes a lot of tackles for loss, and he's going to revive that Alabama pass rush this fall.
I'm going to go with Justin Jefferson. I think you got an athletic quarterback who can scoot. You got Jefferson, a little bit undersized linebacker that can scoot, maybe a little spy action, trying to keep him from getting loose and running around, something to think about. Certainly a guy that can pursue from the back end. We all hope Lawson, he's got his knee brace off. We're all rooting for him to have a big year, the secondary. But I think Jefferson's a sneaky pick because he could be a guy that can trying to contain. He's going to be a tough kid to the quarterback's a tough kid to contain. He's got some quickness and obviously some confidence. But I think Jefferson could give you something to think about from that angle. While we're at it, we want to remind you that we've got a $1 get into BamaOnLine.com. I'm no bigger fan of this than Andrew Bone. He loves the thumbs up and the promotion. He does it better than me, actually. But come see us.
Spend your dollar. Spend your dollar. Come
spend
check it out for a week.
Check it out. It is worth it. Charlie Potter and Blake Byler do great team stuff. Andrew Bone chips in on the team. I've got some 2-cent opinions. If you want to hear them, we talk recruiting. We do stuff nonstop. And the BOL Roundtable, the Tide community, our message board is off the chain. It is nonstop action. A lot of talk, a lot of discussions, a lot of fans fitting in there. And there's no better time than to try us out right now. We do have a lot of fun. Andrew, let's get into our predictions. I've already did one on BamaOnLine. On BOL, I put out a prediction. I got Bama by a couple of touchdowns. Tell me yours, and then we'll talk about why.
Yeah, I was on a Florida State show on War Chant the other day, and they asked me at the end what my prediction of the scores, and I hadn't thought about it one single time because we always do our predictions at the end of the week. And it just never has crossed my mind. I think I was wrong with the prediction that I made. I basically said I think it's going to be a 24-20 type ball game. You know, I felt like Alabama was going to win. I honestly don't think it's going to be that close. I think Alabama is going to be able to pull away. Now, is it going to be close in the first half? Probably so. I mean, you got a lot of guys, breaking in for the first time this season. You got, Ty Simpson, first-time quarterback. Oh, I would love to see Ty Simpson throw 3 touchdown passes in the first half. I don't think that's going to happen. So I think with that home crowd, it's going to be loud. It's going to cause some issues early on. But I think as the game sort of progresses, I think we're going to see Alabama kind of wear them out from a physical standpoint. I think, you sort of see maybe a 31-20 type ball game. I think Florida State can score late, 31-14, maybe entering, 6-7 minutes left to go in the game. Florida State gets a touchdown late, so I'll go 31 to 20.
I'll be in the minority. I think there's going to be a quick start. I think Ryan Grubb, you see those offensive guys, Sark, Lane, they're great with their script, which is their first 20 plays. Now, the weather could factor this in. You got a first-time quarterback with the energy you said. But I think you want to get out ahead if you can quick. And, I know those saving to grind them down. Ideally, you want to get out quick and throttle down. You don't want to have to start out a little bit slow and go. But I think they're going to have something planned. It's the same as I imagine Gus Malzahn feels. They've got something for that defense. I think Ryan Grubb's that way. I've got Alabama 31-13. Andrew, we'll be talking more about this. There will be Charlie Potter and Blake Byler will have a show tomorrow, breaking down the game entirely, I believe. Andrew and I will have a post-game show on Sunday at some point. We're going to try to do this show. We know it's Wednesday. We're going to try to do more regularly on Tuesday. Andrew's moving, has some stuff going on, so he'll be settled in next week. So, Andrew, let's move on to the college games that we've got to watch. You're going to have to fit these in, but 11 a.m., we got Texas, we got Ohio State, we got Arch Manning, we got Julian Say, an extremely anticipated quarterback matchup between two of the top 3 teams in the country at 11 a.m.
Yeah, that should be an interesting game. Obviously, a lot of people were expecting Arch to win the Heisman, be the first round, first pick overall in the NFL draft next season. A lot of pressure on him, going into Ohio State, and it doesn't seem like a ton of people are talking about Ohio State and Julian saying maybe they are. You just hear a lot more about Ohio, or just hear a lot more about Texas right now. Being able to go up there and win that game, it seems pretty easily. I don't know. I'm interested to see how Julian Sain does. These are both 2 quarterbacks that were, Julian being a former Alabama player for a couple of weeks, and then Arch Manning being a big target for Alabama a couple of years ago. So, really intrigued to kind of watch that game, see how each one performs, and kind of see, which. And I'm not going to say that who wins that game is going to win the national championship. Those teams are going to be able to get better as the season goes along, but kind of looks. It's going to be interesting to kind of see who is going to have that first loss on their resume between those 2 schools, because may not get any easier for a couple of them, especially Texas playing in the SEC.
I like Texas. I think Ohio State lost a lot more than we realize. I still think they've got talent, but I think losing an NFL type offensive coordinator, NFL type defensive coordinator, they lost. I know they lost Will Howard, but they lost monsters in that backfield with the running back, with Henderson and Judkins having gone pro. I saw Henderson returned a kickoff in preseason for a touchdown. So I think little things like that. They've still got Jeremiah Smith. So when you got that wild card, chuck it up and hope he gets it, and he tends to go get it. Crowd will be live and all that. But I do think there's a reason we constantly say it's hard to repeat. It's hard to keep that energy. So that's another thing I think has factored again against them, because I believe if Texas loses this game, I think there's going to be some people really upset with Sark, because Sark has said, we've worked for this year. We've worked for this game. He's got his team where he wants. A lot of talent surrounding him, some big-time defensive players. Let's move on. We got Clemson and LSU right out of the gate. And, another mass. I mean, that's two of the biggest games I'm anticipating for the whole year.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of LSU hype lately, a lot of Nussmeier for Heisman, the number 1 overall pick. Dabo's confident with his team. He's going in there. I think LSU's a slight 3.5-point favorite. Who you got in this one?
The game's at Clemson, right? It is in Atlanta.
It's in Memorial Stadium,
okay.
South Carolina.
I like Clemson. I think they really came on late last year. Cade Klubnik, who a lot of people were expecting to be this superstar quarterback his freshman year. It took him a couple of years to really develop. But last season I thought he looked really good, and he had, I think, his top 3 receivers were all freshmen, and they were outstanding last season. And I don't know if I know their offensive line as well as other people do, but their defensive front, obviously, with a guy from your neck of the woods and Peter Woods. I think that they have an outstanding defensive front. T.J. Parker, another guy. I think I saw the other day they have 3 defensive linemen that are all projected to go in the first, second round. And obviously, it's a very early projection, but I think they're really talented. I think they can match up well with LSU on the defensive and offensive fronts. And we'll see. That'll be a tough loss for Brian Kelly, because he's had some tough season opening losses.
They lost 5 in a row. I think 5 in a row, right? Does that sound right?
Was it USC that beat them last year?
Yes, in the upset. Miami beat them 2 years ago, I feel like.
And Florida State beat them 1 year. So
yeah,
the Florida State undefeated.
We got the years wrong. I think we got the team right. I'm not sure if we got the order right, but we got the last 3 years right. So big game for Brian Kelly.
Nobody on this show cares.
No, we don't care. We're just but I do think I like Clemson as well. I'm interested to see what happens after this team. They went heavy portal with this team. Obviously not very happy with their team last year. Defensively, I think offensively they felt okay about it. But I've got Clemson. I think this is kind of what Dabo's built for. You really increase your chances if you're Clemson of making the playoffs. Yeah. There's not many teams that can beat you if you can get past LSU. LSU still has a very tough road, obviously talented, but SEC, you come out of that gate with a loss. So really excited. That's a night game. So you have your appetizer in Texas. You got Alabama, and then at night you have Clemson, LSU. So I'm pretty excited about that day. Andrew, let's get to recruiting before we get out of here. Big performances this week. Andrew and I just put together our BOL commitment performance of the week. That's where we choose out of the commitments who played best in our opinion. This was not an easy decision. This seems like it should be an easy decision, but when you look at guys, we went with Jordan Edmondson, and, surprisingly, he had 115 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns, 5 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and an interception. And the interception's interesting to me because he's not going to see a lot of action. You're not throwing at him a lot. He's long range. He's all over the place. Right. But what I like the most about him, he was coming in very similar to Zion Gibson behind his pads and hitting people. That's how he racked up those tackles. Those were all within 5 yards of the ball. But obviously a great performance, and but not an easy one for us to choose.
No, but when he's able to have success on both sides of the ball, as you mentioned. I mean, 115 yards receiving, a couple touchdowns. It sort of reminds me, and not comparing the two, but reminds me of Eddie Jackson during his senior season.
Hey,
he used a lot on the offensive side of the ball. He was actually recruited as a cornerback to begin with by Alabama. And this was, obviously Jordan got recruited a lot earlier than Eddie Jackson did, but he was a guy that starting on both sides of the ball. A lot of people looked at him as potentially a wide receiver in college as well. So Jordan certainly had a great coming out party this, or I guess it's his second game of the season, but really impressed with what he was able to do.
You're right. Eddie was a wide receiver when he picked the ball off, right? When he was returning.
Yeah.
When he had that ball in his hand on special teams or an interception, he was a wide receiver. That's a great call. Eddie was coming off an injury. Bama got involved. There was this big Bama bump. Obviously, the guy was pretty damn good. Spent some time in the NFL. I think he made a Pro Bowl. That year was crazy for us because we're dealing with Von Bell, Jalen Ramsey, and Eddie Jackson for one spot. That's how Nick Saban and those guys got down. Devon Jackson wasn't comfortable playing corner. He wanted to play facing the ball, went to Ohio State, had a good career. And then, of course, Jalen Ramsey went to FSU, really shined, went with Jeremy Pruitt, in fact. So he won. But let's talk about a couple of these other guys. I mean, second week in the row, we've seen Mari Johnson from Muscle Shoals really show off. I mean, even when he doesn't make plays, he's making plays. He's in the backfield. He's forcing the issue. He's pushing running backs wide. He's making quarterbacks get rid of that ball a lot quicker than they want to.
Yeah, Muscle Shoals had a dominant defensive performance against Zion Gibson's team at Gadsden City last week. 24-6 win for Muscle Shoals. Kind of a revenge game. Gadsden City beat them last year in the season opener, but Mari was had another outstanding performance. I mean, this is a guy that we have talked about. I think since the spring, you and I, Tim, is probably being one of the more underrated players, not only in Alabama's class, but overall in the country. He's a 4-star, but he's not a high 4-star. I think Alabama sees him as one of their best overall players in their recruiting class. A guy that they absolutely love on the defensive front. He's 6'4", 265 pounds. He's going to get obviously bigger once he gets to Tuscaloosa, so he could really be a force on the inside in the future. But 3 sacks on Friday night, so he's off to a great start for his senior season.
He also threw in 3 tackles for loss and 5 quarterback hurries, and he can get after you. Big guy's going to carry more weight down the road. A guy we've been extremely excited to see, Ced Morgan, did not take long to impress us. Took a drag route against 7A Opelika. I mean, I had a lot of people that saw the post going, who's he playing against, kids? He's playing against 7A Opelika, who took Thompson to like 3 overtimes last year in the state playoffs. Obviously, there's probably been some change there, but he took a drag route, 87 yards, and he looked, I mean, I hate to say it, looked a little bit like Julio running around out there on that play.
Yeah, you knew who Julio was when he stepped out onto the field, playing at a big school like Foley, because I mean everybody was just significantly smaller. But you take Julio off the field, everybody looks pretty normal size. But I mean, Ced Morgan, we all know. I mean, he's 6'4", 220 pounds, physical guys. Has really improved on his. I don't want to say speed, because I think he's always had good speed, but it seems like he's got a little bit more juice, a little bit more burst and acceleration. That was what was impressive to me. And he started off really strong. I think what was the final stat level? Was it
177 yards and 8 receptions?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's a guy that schools are going to focus on throughout.
That's what I was going to say. He had that 87-yarder. They were already focused on him. And after that, they went from 2 guys to 3 guys on him. Now, I don't know if they did that, but he saw a lot of attention. And one more we want to mention real quick is Javari Barnett. We've been beating the drum that this was a steal. This was an underrated guy. On 3 does have him higher than anybody else, but this guy comes out 16 carries, 161 yards, and a touchdown. And I think you described him best when you say he runs a little mean. He's got a little violence in his running style.
Yeah, he's a physical guy. So being 6'1", 217 pounds, but not all 215-pound running backs are physical. So
No.
you like to see these guys run hard, and run pissed off. I mean, this is a guy who a lot of people haven't talked about throughout the year because he missed most of his junior season, only played in 3 games during his junior season. Almost has the same number of yards rushing after the first game that he did all year last year. So Alabama jumped on him early. They really liked him. Went and saw him during the winter evaluation period, offered him, really wanted him to be I wouldn't say they wanted him as a number 2 guy in the class. They obviously wanted a Xavier Kroll, but even if they didn't land Kroll in this class, they were really pushing hard to try to get Barnett. And it's certainly looking like they made a right decision there to fresh off the start of his senior season.
Before we get out of here on that, we're going to finish with Brian Williams, another Shep guy. Had 2 touchdowns, including an 80-yarder where he looked fantastic. We let those long legs run. Owen Cobble, I'm trying to mentally say his name right. His dad jumped in our mentions one time and helped us figure it out. It's said like Cabble. So it's Owen Cabble. He had 2 receptions, 2 touchdowns. Counting said that gives 5 touchdowns on the night. These guys looked the part. Shep certainly done a good job. And quarterback Kawa Tatum Kawa had 3 touchdowns, passed for 200+ yards and a loss. Now, this week
you got a few guys coming this week for the first time, like
Xavier Kroll,
and Xavier Kroll coming back after.
Speaking of running pissed off, I got a feeling Xavier's going to be a little irritated about.
I feel bad for Demopoulos. They're going to have a difficult. I'm going to say first half because I don't know if he's going to play much in the second half. I think it might be
Jackson competed with Saraland without Kroll. So
obviously,
if y'all not familiar, AHSAA and Kroll they had an investigation. He agreed to sit out 1 game. He's cleared the rest of the year. Something to do with the car loan from somebody he was close to. But he's back. Jet Tamal is back. Nolan Wilson's back. So there's some big names. We will have a thread every Friday night. It'll start Thursday. I'll post the schedule later. But we have a thread where we talk about the games. We watch the games. We discuss the plays. We share the highlights. We give opinions. We have a lot of those for college football and the NFL. Andrew, before we get out of here.
And for those, and just so everyone knows, that's on BamaOnLine.com on the BOL Roundtable message board. So go to BamaOnLine.com, go to BOL message board. That's where our thread is every single Friday night.
He does it better than me. I told y'all. You were warned. So, Andrew, let's talk briefly. Recruiting's been quiet. We got kids that'll take visits. Defensive line is what we circled, right? Trying to add 1 more guy, seeing what they can get. But they'll be evaluating a lot of positions. Last year, 3 flips? They found Marshall Pritchett. They Henry was a 4. They had 4 flips last year during the year.
Yeah, and a couple of those guys we weren't even talking about heading into the season.
Not Henry, not Henry at all.
Flips. I mean, you have to kind of wait, and I wrote about this the other day. You have to sort of wait to that first really big game in Tuscaloosa, during the season, and obviously there's going to be some home games, but I think once you get to October, early November, Tennessee, LSU, who ends up coming to campus that maybe you weren't expecting or maybe you weren't talking about, or a guy that you were heavily recruiting back in the summer, committed somewhere, but then you hadn't heard a lot from him, shows up on campus. And we saw that with Ivan Taylor last year. We weren't talking heavily about Ivan Taylor being a really potential flip for Alabama leading up until he showed up to the Georgia game on September the 28th. Derek Meadows didn't visit at all during the college football season last year and ends up flipping his commitment late in the process. So there's a lot that can go on, but talk a little bit more about the positions that they're still kind of looking at.
You make a good point about, Meadows didn't visit. Nolan Wilson's visited in Miami, kind of expected. His mother said she wanted to see a big-time game, not unexpected. He'll be at Alabama at least a couple of times early on. And I was worried because you take a visit. Like you said, you don't have to take an additional visit to commit. You've already seen, he's already been to Miami. These kids, Meadows had already been to Alabama. Taylor's a funny one because It's literally, the once bitten, twice shy. Bama got bit twice. Committed to Michigan, committed to Notre Dame, and Bama just stuck in there and, outlasted them for Ivan Taylor. And after seeing and hearing so much about him, we see what the fight was about. But defensive lineman, I think, Tank Jones is committed to Oregon. You'll hear his name mentioned. It's probably going to be slow here early on. Titan Davis committed to Michigan. That's a guy, they're looking at. You got in-state guys, Emmanuel Ruffin. You got Tyson Bacon. I'm not saying Bama's going on these guys, but we're saying Bama will be evaluating everyone, just like Nick Saban did, like it's a brand new season.
Yeah, no doubt. We've seen so many guys that have emerged during their senior season. They missed their junior season because of injury, and then all of a sudden, guy pops up during the middle of the year, sends out his highlight tape, and they move to the top of the recruiting board. We talked about Eddie Jackson earlier. Christian Barmore is another guy that we saw that nobody. He moved from the offensive line to the defensive line, and then sent out his highlight film. Alabama offered him, of course, at the time. Oh, they're offering them because they missed on somebody. Somebody else went elsewhere. So we got to go out to the Northeast and get this lowly ranked 4-star recruit that nobody knows about.
Crazy.
You're not necessarily going after guys that you think can't play in Tuscaloosa. They're not going to do that just to, fill a number. They're going after guys that they feel like have a chance to either play right away or over the course of a year or two can be developed and may not transfer after the first year just because they're not starting, or they have to pay these guys $400,000 or $500,000. So you go after the guys that you feel like can play here. Sometimes they're cheap, sometimes they're expensive.
Here's what we know: Bama loves them athletic. They have a certain athletic type. Bear Fretwell, I think, is a classic example of that. His best football's ahead of him. Zay Hall's in that area too. Those are guys that fit the athletic mold. Got to get them bigger, stronger, and get them ready to play. And they want guys that have the right mindset. They don't want guys asking about who's coming with me. They don't want to know who have I got to compete with. They want those guys to want to be there. Money's always going to be a factor to some degree. Mm-hmm. They don't want that to be the only factor. I think you just have to accept money's going to be a factor, but they don't want that to be the only factor. But they're not scared to mix it up. And we get Bama loses a guy, Bama's poor. No, sometimes schools just go all in. Oregon went all in to get Tank Jones. They did what they had to do. It didn't make much sense. Texas A&M ain't broke. They're not cutting my grass for spare money. Texas A&M's got money, and they backed out of there and didn't go at that same level. So, Andrew, give us some closing thoughts before we get out of here. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. We know your time is important. Thank you. We want to see you on the round table. We want to see you in the comments, and we will want to see you next week. Andrew Bone, get us out of here.
Yeah, just really excited about the season overall. I think they're going to have a great year. As I mentioned, talked to some guys earlier this week. They felt, one of the guys that I spoke with, talked about how this year's team reminds them so much. They were on the 2008 team and then the 2009 team. They said this is a season that feels a lot like 2009 because we got so close in 2008. We got a little bit of a taste, obviously a little bit different, but they felt like this is a team that has really kind of bought into Coach DeBoer and this staff. They had opportunities to enter the transfer portal multiple times. They decided to stay. There's belief. There's understanding of the offensive and defensive schemes as compared to last year because everybody was kind of scared. Am I doing the right thing? Am I going to be in the right spot? Am I going to get yanked out of the game if I mess up? There was a lot of questions heading into the season. Now everybody kind of understands the lingo. They understand this coaching staff on and off the field. So I'm excited to see what they can do, not only against Florida State, but throughout this whole season. But let's focus on Florida State. Let's get down there, win the game, and see who needs to improve and see who stands out. So we're really excited about the overall football season.
I love it. And again, you'll see us next week, Tuesday. I'll be telling Andrew how right I was and how wrong he was for our picks to click. Of course, Ryan and LT. I feel like I'm a distinct.
As long as we're both not wrong on the.
If we're both wrong
on who wins the game, I'll be.
If we're both wrong, we'll see you 5 Tuesdays from now. So
they might not see us next week.
You might just see Andrew if we lose this one. So, all right, we appreciate your time. Thank you. Roll Tide, and we'll see you soon.